Hey everybody, SupConnect Live. This is Kristen Thomas here. Thrilled to be back. It's Thursday, and that means I get to be chatting with someone in the world of paddling. Thanks for joining us, whether you're new, first timer to SupConnect Live, which is every Thursday, been going on for a couple of years, or you're a regular. Appreciate all you guys. Adrian, Brad, Alita, Garrett, thanks for jumping on. It's interesting when we have a topic and it's put out there. We definitely are talking to an OG, an early adopter of not just our sport, but others too. He was the same in kayak as in stand-up paddleboarding. And he has played, I think, almost every role I can possibly think of in stand-up paddleboarding since 2007. So lots of years. Can't wait to get talking. Is about to be heading to Colorado for the exciting GoPro mountain game. So I want to completely debunk what whitewater events are about and like. I mean, it just looks like the most incredible event. So super excited to be talking with Dan. Lucky enough to have known him my whole 12 years of paddling, but he's been paddling for stand-up for 15 and other sports in the water world for much longer than that. Let's see if we can find him. I saw that he was signed on. If you don't follow him, you should. Again, involved in so many aspects of stand-up paddleboarding. So he hasn't requested to join, so let's request that he join. Hey, Harmony, Lisa, good to see you guys. All right, so this is always the part where we hope technology works. It's on here. Thanks for those of you who shouted out. We did have a fire really close to me, but it was going the other direction. Okay, you just got to flip your phone. It's on. You're there, Dan.
Yeah, there we go. How you doing, Kristen?
There he is, and he's outside.
I'm outside. I'm by the water. I think you can see
I didn't even ask where you were right now. So I think of you as a nomad. You're always moving around. Florida, yeah. Canada, Hood?
Canada, yep.
All of those?
Oh, no, I'm in Canada. Can you hear me?
Yes. Great. We can hear you. You're outside. You're in Canada. Looks like a nice day. You're not all bundled up too much.
No, it's beautiful. It's 27 degrees. So in Fahrenheit, that's I think 82 or something like that. So
oh, wow.
It's a beautiful day.
Really nice.
It's nice. It's warm.
I love that you
hopefully hit the water.
Yeah. That you are both both Canadian and American, so you speak both types of temperatures. Lots of us can't convert one to the other.
Metric and imperial. Yeah, it's always fun doing the conversions.
There you go. Well, we could talk for hours because your background in water in general is just huge and goes on forever. But I have to say that you were like one of the first people I saw, not in person. And so meeting you the first time was like, wow, because this was one of my first purchases in 2010 when I started, was the guide to how to stand up paddleboard. And it was in our shop, the stand up paddleboard shop in Laguna Beach, which you remember, playing on video repeat. So I'd go in the shop and see you too. Wow.
So you're probably tired of hearing my voice by now. Huh?
Not at all, never. And of course, I was just with you at Carolina Cup. So you get around. And I know we're going to talk a lot about mountain games, but we have to start with you. I mean, your kayak background is huge. You said you started as a kid on the front of a canoe, but all that ran into stand-up paddleboarding in Hood River in 2007. So you're one of the early ones. Talk about how you got started there.
Yeah, I was working for a paddle company called AT Paddles, Adventure Technology Paddles, which old OG friend of mine who I'm still really good friends with. His name is Corin Addison. Him and I designed a kayak paddle. It was one of the first bench shaft kayak paddles, and it really helped us do better and do really well in our paddling and competitions. And one of the owners there, I was working there in sales, customer service, doing some designs, but we had some pretty successful designs at the time. And so, hold on a second. Someone is adjusting my camera for me, so just hold on one moment.
There you are. Now you're right in the middle.
Okay. It's going to fall over, though. I've got it kind of literally duct taped to a picnic table here, so we're making do with what we have here. Sorry. So yeah, I was working with Adventure Technology Paddles and a guy named JD Davies, had just gone to Hawaii, I think, to like learn how to do a dugout canoe. He literally went there and like cut down a tree, or they had a tree for him. He dug out his own OC1 and basically built a canoe like the Hawaiians did. But he saw Laird out there stand up paddling with some friends, and he came back, and he knew that my back was still kind of sore from kayaking, and I wasn't really into the competition scene as I was previously. And I was really into kiteboarding, and I just loved snowboarding, and he just knew I loved skateboarding, anything board sport related. And but I hadn't really gotten into surfing yet, just because I just hadn't felt the vibe yet out in the ocean, especially in Oregon. And he came back, he's like, I have the sport for you. You stand on a board and you paddle with like a long canoe style paddle. And he was already designing some paddles for Kealoha and helping Dave Chun with Kealoha design some paddles. He's like, so we can make the paddle. We just need to buy a couple boards. And I was like, showed me one picture, and I said, I am all in. How much is it? Let's do it. So I literally saw one picture of it, and JD had told me about it. And I bought a Surf Tech Tandem. What was the board? It was like really narrow. It was like 11.5 feet long. It was like 26 inches wide. It was a tandem surfboard, basically. And I took it out on the Columbia and started paddling around. And first couple strokes were a little awkward. And I was like, this is tippy, but it's going to be challenging. But I was really into that physical, mental challenge of it and something new. And I just fell in love with it right away. And I was like, after maybe a half an hour and several falls, I got the hang of it, you know, so I started paddling okay. And I was like, wow, you can move pretty quick, much better view. I don't have to be upside down in the cold water, and it's more fitness related, which I was kind of excited about. But it didn't take long for the kind of the gears in my head to start turning and wondering what it might be like to take it down the river. Standing up, almost like snowboarding down the river. And there's a little bit of history there already that we can get into later if you want. But yeah, I mean, after the first 10 minutes of stand-up paddling in my life, I was already looking forward to tackling some rapids.
That is awesome. Now that's something new I learned, that you actually jumped on board with a picture before you had even tried it, knowing yourself and your friend knowing you. And I didn't realize it was actually in the gorge that early, but thanks to your friend coming back from Hawaii, seeing what he saw and you jumping in. It looks like Eric down in San Diego says, was it a Mickey Munoz glider? Was that the name of your tandem?
Yep, it was. Yep, thanks. That's probably Eric Disc, huh? He probably knows.
It is Disco Surf. Yeah, thanks, Eric. So that is very cool how you got started. So before that, freestyle, all this whitewater stuff you had done with kayak, and then you found kite surfing, a love for that. So all water sports, as you just said, all board sports. And knowing, I mean, that doesn't surprise me now, knowing everything you've done, that you were a designer and you've worked in the industry in so many different roles with a lot of different companies. You know, shout out, I was talking to Dave Bainey yesterday, and we're thanking you for getting us into like Warner when you were with Warner. That's how we found that paddle company, and that you were designing. I didn't know you worked with Corin Addison. That's awesome. Another OG, definitely, and these things. But so stand up 07, and then, yeah, you were early, and you had done, I forget what you called them, the crazy films of kayak, because there's a lot of them out there. So I think you had the background probably with a little bit of filming and everything. And this is needed when a sport is brand new and we don't know what we're doing. And often all we see maybe is a picture. How do you learn how to do something? You couldn't be everywhere to teach people in person, even though I have taken classes from you. I took a whitewater in Ottawa at an event of yours that I went to. So I know you're a great instructor, but this is so valuable. I wonder how many people out there started with this, because you were the first, weren't you?
One of the first, yeah, I think so. I think C4 Waterman might have had a couple videos back then. But I saw a need for it, for sure, being in a new sport and being a bit inspired from my kiteboarding. I learned how to kiteboard by watching VHS tapes. So Ken Winter, actually, and a guy named Rod Parmenter had joined forces. I had later met them. but I learned how to kiteboard literally watching VHS tapes. Like I wore the tape out. I had to literally tape it together, like unscrew the VHS tape, tape it back together because I would rewind and watch it over and over, how to jibe, how to do this. And so I saw that as a great medium, going forward, 'cause you can get out to so many people. And the DVD was just kind of the medium of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously no one uses DVDs anymore. So it was great for when we did it and what we did. It was amazing. And I'm super grateful for my partner, Chris Emmerich, who we got to travel and go to Hawaii a ton. And we traveled all over California and the Northwest and in Florida, and putting it together and writing the script and trying to kind of really figure out, what was the easiest, simplest way to explain all these different techniques on how to do the sport and a little bit about all the different equipment. And it was tough because it took us a couple years to put that together, and the sport was changing so quickly that we literally ended up filming that whole thing about 3 times because we had to keep changing segments to kind of keep up with it.
Wow.
Techniques would change, boards would change, paddles would change, techniques, all this stuff would change so quickly. So I'm really grateful to Chris Emmerich. If he's out there, a big shout out to him. He's been a really good kayak buddy of mine ever since. And yeah. We teamed up on.
Well, I can't think of any better person to ask. Like, it's been 15 years now since you first started. Has it, it's still, there's changes. I assume it's slowed down some, but are you still seeing changes and adaptations and new ideas coming out?
Oh, absolutely. That's why I keep paddling. I think, it's that, I would get bored otherwise. I mean, it keeps it interesting. And I was listening to an interview you did with Ted Schatz, and I liked, kind of what he said about, it's got to be cerebral enough that you're like thinking about it and the techniques involved to make it, stimulating enough that it's not just, out there just doing the same thing day after day, hour after hour, stroke after stroke. So that's what I like about it. You watch different paddlers. There's so many different techniques, whether you're, watching someone like Fiona paddle or someone like, maybe like Tim Oliver, just to name a newer guy. He's really tall. I think he's from Canada. He's got an interesting stroke, or even like the Hasulio brothers, there's so many different styles out there. And for me, it's kind of like watching them all and putting them all together and finding what works for me and my body type. And yeah, it's really fun. And then with the whitewater thing, that was a Pandora's box of just trying to literally, I call it crash and learn. You crash and then you learn, and then you crash and then you learn. You don't burn, you learn, so that was kind of what I was doing with whitewater and Hood River. Luckily, there was a couple guys around I could go paddle with, so I wasn't by myself. And we took some hard knocks, but we figured it out. And now it's kind of like second nature. I always thought I'd kind of be the black sheep in the SUP community just doing whitewater, but it caught on quite a bit. I'm really surprised actually how it's caught on in Colorado and in Europe, and there's festivals that feature it, and it's just, with the growth of the sport going from the coastal regions to the center part of the country to where it's more freshwater and there's mountains and runoff, then it totally makes sense.
I would say it's probably one of the most aspirational areas that people really want to try it, but don't have a whitewater background or don't live Southern California. We have to go up to Kern is the very closest river, So it's exciting. I feel like we need to debunk like the whole world. Like Colorado and around it has such a thriving whitewater SUP community and a lot of events and things. And the biggest, you're going to be there, and we're going to talk about, is GoPro Mountain Games, or at least that's the one I feel like I've heard about the most. I haven't been there. Looks like the most amazing whole week festival of just all kinds of stuff. You got to bring your dog and your disc golf skills and everything else, but it has a couple of SUP events, Saturday and Sunday. But talk about whitewater. I've talked to some other whitewater people. I've done a little bit myself. You were at the Payette River Games, I believe. That was such an interesting, suddenly there's a lot of money out there. So a lot of people made the effort to get there to a new state, a place they hadn't paddled. And there were a lot of lessons going on right before, because a lot of us had never done any whitewater, but got the equipment, which I'd love to talk about too. But talk about the GoPro Mountain Games and your involvement before. Have you raced it? Are you race director? Are you commentating? You do all of those well.
Yeah, and yes, and that is true on all fronts. So I started going to the mountain games 20 years ago. It originated as the Jeep Mountain Games, and then it became the Teva Mountain Games for like 12 years or something. So Teva really, rooted their kind of mountain lifestyle, footwear. They used to make really cool kayak shoes, real high end kind of performance river running footwear for us. And then shoot, I don't know how many years GoPro's been involved with it. I think it's about 7 or 8 maybe now. And then GoPro picked it up, and they really expanded it. When GoPro picked it up, they they expanded it out, so it now incorporates like dozens of different sports and literally like 60 different events. But it started as a whitewater event, and that's the reason why it's on the date that it's on, which is always the first weekend of June, because that is historically the range of the highest water day in Colorado.
Oh, wow.
And pretty much all the your highest water day is going to be probably in the first 10 days of June, with all the snow melt and everything like that. So it's held on Gore Creek, which goes right through Vail. This is a creek. This isn't a river, so it's a much smaller volume river. Right now, it's running about 130 cubic feet a second. And to put that in perspective, the Colorado River is normally running about 40,000 cubic feet a second, and the Columbia River gets up to 250,000 CFS, cubic feet a second.
Wow.
So this is a very small volume creek. And so fin selection is really important. You're not running 8-inch fins on Gore Creek. So a lot of the boards, I mean, like the Hollas, they work great because they have that retractable fin. So that's a fin system that works really well there. And a lot of other people will be running their Badfish boards or whatever they have with like a softer fin, a rubbery fin that's not going to break or break the fin box. But also we have an inflatable only rule there. So you have to paddle an inflatable board, which I think is really fun, because probably 99% of what you see people running whitewater with these days is an inflatable. So we have 2 different events. We have a downriver sprint called the SUP Sprint, and it's about 3.5 miles downriver. It starts at almost 9,000 feet, so the elevation is quite high. The air is quite thin. I think the winning times have been right around 18 minutes. I know they're like 8. Most of the top 10 times will be in the 18 to 20 minute range. So it's a sprint, it's 3 miles downstream. It's pretty continuous whitewater, so it's not like a lot of flat sections. So it's just constantly having to watch where you're going, find the deepest water, and then it's punctuated by 5 or 6 distinct like rapids. Probably a lot of them have names. The only ones I know the names are like Beaver Dam Rapid, which has like 3 distinct little drops that typically get kind of dammed up in the shoulder seasons by the beavers, and then it kind of breaks through in the late spring when the water gets high enough. And it's super fun. A lot of people paddle there. I know the town of Vail has a weekly series, which just started, I think, 2 days ago on Tuesday nights. So that runs for 4 or 6 weeks. And there's all kinds of people that come out for that. They have kayak racing and rafting and stand-up. And so it's really cool to see how the sport's getting embraced. And then getting back to the mountain games, the second event we have is I think an event that we pretty much started at the mountain games, and it was inspired by motocross and border cross. So we decided to go, well, it's going to be like if we have 4 people racing down the rapids at the same time. But instead of making it just from point A to point B, we added some gates. And with whitewater, you usually have two different style of gates. You have downstream gates and you have upstream gates. So the course will have a couple downstreams and a couple upstreams. And 4 people race, and then like 2 people move on, and then it's just bracketed out just like that. But as you make it into the subsequent rounds, we add more ups and downs. So we add more, more features and make it a little more technical. And it's always just a blast to watch. I mean, we've had 15,000 people there watching sometimes. And we've had winners from Hawaii. We've had lots of winners from Colorado. We've had a winner from Japan, New Zealand. Annabelle Anderson came out one year and did really well, I think. Candace has been out there. Kai's been out there. Chuck Patterson. We've had a number of people come from Hawaii in the past to come and do it, and they really loved it. So it was really neat to see the draw, and I think that's what it was, hey, let's go to Colorado. We can get on the river, and we can also do this event at the same time.
Yeah. So it sounds like, again, an amazing, I don't know if people camp Vail's a beautiful town. I understand. I've never been there, but it sounds like you got to go for the week. Concerts, food, all the other competitions, and watching. There aren't that many. We don't always bill our events as being spectator events, but I think it's maybe Lily from MTI just asked, where's the best place to watch? So for those who might be going, that's definitely a question. But before that, I want you to explain gates to visualize for people if they've never looked at a whitewater event. They hang down. I mean, it was mind-blowing to me the first time I saw it. I'm like, wait, you're supposed to do what? And
well, slalom kayaking's been around since the 72 Olympics in Germany. Mm-hmm. And so basically there's wires going suspended across the river. And then you have basically PVC poles that come down, and they're usually marked red or green. Yeah. Greens are downstream and reds are upstream. And in kayaking, you can't touch them or you get a penalty. So you have to be really precise. We don't do penalties if you touch the gate. You basically just have to get around the gate. And the gate's always swinging, right? Because probably someone else hit it if you're not the first one through it. So as long as you go through, where the gate was, we have judges at the gates to kind of call the action and make sure everyone goes through the course. But basically, if you're going through a downstream gate, you just have to pass in between the 2 poles in a downstream fashion. Doesn't matter if you're pointed upstream or you're pointed downstream or you're pointed to river right or river left. Just as long as you pass by that gate going from upstream to downstream, then you're good. An upstream gate, you have to actually go around the gate downstream and then come back up through the gate. And those gates are often, or almost always, located in what's called an eddy. And the eddy is the backflow of the river. So it's going upstream anyways. And eddies are whitewater people live by eddies. They go from eddy to eddy to eddy to eddy. And that is pretty much what whitewater paddling is. And it's really fun. And so you have to be, you can't just be a person who just puts in at point A and just paddles just straight down without ever turning around or anything like that to where your car is parked downstream. Like, you're not going to do well. So it takes some of these basic skills to be able to navigate a course like that. And when I'm doing lessons or whatever, the first thing I'm going to teach you is what an eddy is, how to catch an eddy. I know we went over it extensively when you took my class, and that was 90% of what the class is about. Because you can't just get on the river and just go willy-nilly down and see what's going to, be around the next corner. It's like a cartoon, where you're about to go off the waterfall and you can't get out, so, that's not really reality. So eddies are an important part of it, and that's why those upstream gates are positioned in those eddies. And
they are
it makes
essential.
it a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And
the race I did with you guys, I had to got to start in an eddy pointing upstream, and you had to do your 180 before you started, and there was a big drop right after that. So, but if you know how to use the water, it takes you that way. But it's a mind-blowing thought to be facing backwards
on a paddleboard. It's like doing a bottom turn, in the river. But the way you use the angles and the rails of your board is like totally opposite of surfing. So it takes someone who comes from like the surfing background, takes them a minute to wrap their head around that and how to kind of angulate their board properly so that they're, not weighting the wrong rail. Because if you
Yeah.
weight the wrong rail, you're in the river so quick.
Yeah.
You fall so fast that just you don't
And
even know
that
what happened.
felt opposite to me. It wasn't what I would do in surfing. The way I wanted to wait was not. So I had to really think about it.
Yeah.
But so exciting and so much to learn. And like water is everywhere, when we have wind or whitewater, there's so much movement. It's ever changing. I just think that's such a fantastic part of it. While we're on this, and Eddie's super important, equipment's really important and very different from a lot of the other types. And we have Lily from Mustang Survival. Sorry, Lily, I forgot it's changed now. So talk about a few of the things you got to have to whitewater.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Lily from Mustang Survival because they make PFDs. So the most important thing is to make sure you have a good life jacket, a good personal flotation device. It's not a waist belt. It's not, something that you grab in case there's emergency and inflate. You wear a real foam life jacket. The next most important thing is a helmet. If you're going to be falling off your board, you might get knocked out. Board might hit you in the head. Who knows? It's just a helmet. And that's just, if you come to the river and you don't have a helmet, you're not paddling. It's like going kayaking without a helmet on. It's not smart. It's like riding a motorcycle without a helmet. It's just not smart. So a helmet is the next most critical thing. Thirdly, the footwear. You've got to have good shoes. You're going to be falling off your board, and in places where you're going to make contact with the bottom of the river, your feet are going to get banged up really quick. It's not like just jumping off a picnic table onto a pile of rocks, because when you're in the air and you hit the ground, you kind of bounce back, because you're in the air. But when you're in the water and your leg is surrounded by water and your foot hits a rock, it's like having a heavyweight MMA guy just ram your foot into a pile of rocks. It has a lot of force behind it. So you need to have really good footwear. There's been a lot of pretty nasty foot injuries for folks that weren't wearing footwear. Mm-hmm. And then you need to wear the appropriate warmth gear. If you have the means, a dry suit is preferred. Otherwise, a wetsuit works really well. Because it does provide also some protection for your lower leg. And then a lot of us also wear knee and shin pads, especially if we're paddling in more challenging conditions, shallower conditions, or unfamiliar conditions. We'll wear knee shin pads. If it's somewhere that I'm super confident and familiar with, I may not wear them. So it's not 100%, but you can smash your kneecap on a rock pretty easily as well. And sometimes when you fall, you don't really want to fall in the whitewater. So you fall on your board. And, I might fall 30, 40, 50 times a day. And your knees are going to get sore, even if you're falling on an inflatable board. Your knees are just going to get sore from that. So it's nice to have a good pair of soft knee shin pads. And I'll usually wear those underneath my my dry suit or my wetsuit, so they're not getting they're not catching in the water if I fall in and stuff like that.
Yeah. And then one you didn't mention, which I know is controversial and not always used, but I want to mention it because I think the technology behind the leash that's for rivers, I love and I want to be adapted, because I think a quick release, a leash being higher, unless you're sup surfing and then you do it a standard surfing way, I think having it within reach, like you guys do when you use a leash on the river, and I know not everybody does or in all conditions, but being able to take it off quickly for racing, for many different uses. There have been people in non-river situations who have died because their leash they were getting pulled and they couldn't reach their ankle or their knee. So
yeah, there's lots of play parks now with surf waves, and there seems to be a lot of ignorance in the river surf community behind leashes, unfortunately. And it is controversial, and it can be very dangerous, but it can also save your life. So you need to know what you're doing, kind of, and have your Your leash system, I say you should have it looked at by a whitewater professional, just so they can say. But one thing you definitely don't ever want to do in the river is connect your leash to your ankle. It needs to be somewhere where you can reach it, and it also has to have a breakaway system so you don't have to release it. If you're in an emergency, the last thing you want to be doing is trying to figure out how to release this thing from my body. So most of them have a Velcro overlap. So what you do is you just partially overlap the Velcro. Instead of doing a full overlap, you do a partial overlap, and then you can pull it apart. And you should be able to test that by manually taking your hand and putting it on where your leash is connected, grabbing your leash. And it should be hard to pull apart, but you should be able to pull that apart. And what that'll do is it'll release on its own. If your whole body weight goes against it, then it'll release on its own. Because the big danger for people who can't see this in their head, because we talk about it, but they don't know why. There's actually a couple good videos on YouTube now. But if your board gets caught on something stationary, you will get strung out by your leash. And if your leash is on your ankle will be upstream and you will be downstream, and you will go underwater, and the weight of the water, you won't be able to do a sit-up to reach your leash on your ankle. So you have to be able to, it needs to just release on its own. Just, that's it. Like if you have a manual release, that's great. If you have I've seen people with manual releases that they were so freaked out at the situation, they didn't even remember, right? They're just swimming with both hands to away from the big hole, or not to get sucked under a raft or whatever it is. So you need to have a system that will release itself. Another way to do it is to take a small piece of bungee, like 1/8-inch bungee, maybe 2 or 3 mil, and tie that around your like where your leash string would be. And that's also going to break under the tension of your body weight. So you'd use that instead of the nylon cord that usually comes with like a leash, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, excellent ideas about how to make that work. But I do still feel like, people like you who know all the different disciplines of stand-up, there's definitely still some adapting. Are you listening out there, Mustang Survival, that I would like to see happen? Because we pulled directly from kayak canoe, directly from surf, and kind of haven't made it always our own. But I think there's things we can learn and adapt still to improve not just our safety equipment, but kind of all equipment in different ways. So cool that you've been a part of that and doing that. Back to industry, so Starboard, Fanatic, you've worked with a lot of different companies, haven't you? And been both sponsored by them because you're an amazing athlete, and also an innovator, and worked on the other side of it. I think you've been team coordinator, I'm guessing, and things like that. Talk about kind of your life in the industry. I know I saw you at trade shows quite a bit. Yeah.
I've basically done everything I've needed to do to stay connected and follow my passion. So outside of starting my own business, which always to me sounded great, but I knew it would just pull me away from the water a lot. I wanted to stay in a position where I knew I could still be paddling every day and getting on the water and stuff like that. So I've worked doing a lot of different things, a lot of different roles. Starboard was one of my first big sponsors that really helped me and allowed me to design some products for them. I helped them with their first whitewater board. And now I work with Mustang Survival, and they make PFDs and survival suits, and they have a big presence with industry, the marine industry, and also with the recreational industry. And Lily and Gordon Colby, who I used to work with way back before the stand-up paddleboard days at Confluence. They owned MTI, and now that is under the Mustang Survival brand. So there's a lot of great PFDs with them. Like they have a nice minimalist belt pack and stuff like that for flat water paddling. And the Chimera, which is a really nice foam PFD as well. It's not a whitewater PFD, but it is a really nice foam PFD. So I've just really been in love with the people and the whole industry, because the people that do it and run the companies behind it, they're very community oriented. They're into building the sport and building the sport within their community. and they're always giving back. And that's a really nice thing to be involved with. You know, it's probably a lot more satisfying than selling dishwashers or something like that.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
thank goodness you've been able to stay in the industry, because it is a challenge and it's had its ups and downs, just like any industry. And right now there's a lot of frustration with supply chain and, lags and things and shipping and all the challenges. And now we have prices of certain things, components of items and gas and, lots going on. So there's challenges in the industry coming out of the pandemic, especially. But I think there's also positive sides, as there always are, to everything. And I do think we have growth we know we have growth in the outdoor world, kind of everything, but definitely water sports too. So how do we make the best of that? From like your early videos, and still people Google, but they can also get you as a coach. You do have your own business and do coaching on the side, and you're Canada, Florida, Oregon, lots of different places. Any insights about what we do to keep stand-up paddling growing?
well, I think one suggestion I had, and one thing I think we're going to like incorporate into Carolina Cup for next year, and which we've already done at the Mountain Games, is have inflatable only classes for racing. Right now, with the popularity of online shopping and certain massive marketplaces, which I don't even have to mention, the majority of people getting into the sport are buying their boards online. And unfortunately, they're not getting any instruction with that. They're not getting any tips on how to work the button on their inflatable. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've seen people, go to the park, unload their new inflatable board, and they're reading the directions. They finally figure out how to connect the pump, and then the husband's there, and he's gassed out after 20 minutes of pumping, and then he pulls the tube off, and all the air comes out, right? We've seen it a million times, right? Literally, the family is deflated. So, I mean, yeah, there's some assembly needed there, and there's a little bit of instruction there, that could go a long way.
Yeah.
And it's just not a reality anymore, because people just aren't, either they live in a geographic area where they don't have a shop near them that has professionals that know what's up, or they're just, it's a pandemic too. Like, people are used to shopping online now. They're gonna shop while they're working, probably, and buy their new paddleboard online. So most people will be starting their stand-up paddling experiences with an inflatable paddleboard. So that's what they're comfortable with. It's financially viable. You don't need a $5,000 carbon fiber race board with the newest $600 paddle or whatever. So when you go to the races, you don't feel like it's an arms race, or you need to invest your 3 months salary in just a board or something. So I really think encouraging an inflatable only racing class could go a long way.
I agree.
And
I mean, how much easier would it be to get to Wilmington Airport, which you can't ship a board into, if you just can roll up with your checked luggage, which is your inflatable board with a 3-piece paddle.
Yeah, and it makes it I think it makes it a lot more, hopefully it encourages a lot of these companies who don't even make hardboards, that are making millions and millions of dollars off these entry-level packages, to come and support events like the Carolina Cup.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what we're not seeing, is the companies that probably are making the most amount of money are not supporting the industry, relationally. Like, they're making that much money. I feel like they should be supporting the sport more.
Yeah.
Hopefully, if we could integrate some of these classes, that we might also attract those type of sponsors, and then people could come from everywhere and compete, because they would be there with boards and they wouldn't be losing. There's really hard to rent a race board, because it's just going to be a losing deal. If you're Banks Outfitters down the road from Carolina Cup, and you rent out 10 race boards to people for $300 a day, which is, I mean, for a $5,000, $4,000 race board, That's a lot of money, but they're going to lose a lot more than that when they have to resell it and it's been used. So it's not a very viable, it's just not reality, you know, and people aren't doing it. And so people aren't coming to the races as much, you know, especially if they're not within a day's drive. So it's changed a lot. And now with the supply chain, you know, getting 14-foot race boards is not as easy as it was in 2015, you know, when they were everywhere. It was a lot easier to get the new carbon all-star, you know what I mean? I drove down to the Pacific Paddle Games with 8 of those on my van one year, you know, and now it's like you got to wait 6 months to get one. So it's just different, you know, and I think that some of the events need to pivot with the change of the industry.
Yeah.
So I hope to see some of that. And if you're listening and you run an event, please think about adding an inflatable class. Like 11 foot and under is great, because you're going to get a lot of round nose paddlers that won't feel outgunned if people start trying to sandbag the class with inflatable race boards or something like that, you know, 12.5 foot, 14-foot race boards. So
Keep it
I don't know.
small. I love that.
It could be a good way to do it.
I think great advice for growth, especially in the racing world. It's very smart. Love to see that happening. So how about some tips for those? We're back to GoPro games and whitewater. So again, I've heard a lot of interest about whitewater. How do you get started in whitewater? How about a few tips?
I mean, if you can, take a lesson. It's definitely the way to go. You want to get going, started on the right foot. Probably your best bet for that is somewhere in like around North Carolina or in the Rockies. Like, I think, you know, there's some big outfits that do like a lot of whitewater kayaking instruction that might be able to offer some stand-up paddleboard whitewater lessons. There's certain individuals, you know, you can find online and on YouTube that you can take private lessons with. Other than that, it's investing in good gear and protection, and just taking your time getting into it, not like pushing yourself, never running a river that you don't have any beta on, you know, making sure you know where to get in, where to get out. If there's any big rapids that you're going to have to get out before and maybe walk around, or portage, that's very important. And then also, if there's no stand-up paddlers around in your area, then you need to kind of look to where the whitewater kayakers are going. Generally, if I ask around and I can find out where people go tubing down the river, I figure if, you know, some guys can tube down the river with a 6-pack, I can probably get down it on my sup okay. So that's kind of like my entry point. And then from there, like if I go to Europe or somewhere and I'm in a region, maybe in Italy or somewhere, and I don't know where to start, I would look at family rafting sections. So where they're taking family raft trips with young kids, you're going to have grade 1 and 2 rapids, and that's where you want to start. And then once you get to be more experienced, you can maybe try some grade 3. And if you're an absolute expert, then maybe some grade 4. And grade 5, just there's not hardly anyone's doing any grade 5 with any much success or very safely. So
yeah. I don't know if you saw in Oklahoma, Red Bull has an event that's group. I would love to. I don't know if they allow you to start with the base of one of our giant stand-up paddle boards and then build off of that. It's in costume and a crazy in the man-made water park. I think you should come down and do a group.
Yeah, I might have to. Isn't that the same weekend as the ICF sprint thing?
Yes, it's the same weekend, so you could do both.
Cool.
Wouldn't that be fun?
Okay, well, I'll be there then.
Okay, let's go. Can't say I've ever paddled Oklahoma. So speaking of locations, I mean, I don't know anybody who's traveled as much as you. And again, you started early, like you said, just in making that early how-to video, you moved around a lot. So it doesn't have to be just whitewater, but what are some of the favorite places you've been? And also, is there any place you haven't been that you still aspire to go to?
Oh, absolutely. I'd love to paddle in New Zealand. I think as far as places I've been, one of my favorite places in Europe is Slovenia on the Ocoee River. It's just a beautiful place. I always wanted to go there on my kayak, and I finally got to go on my stand-up paddleboard and paddle down the Ocoee River and some of the tributaries there. The water's just crystal clear. And Just the whole area around the Socha River there is just, it's absolutely beautiful. Yeah, I just love it. It's kind of like the Pacific Northwest. It's like Sylvania is like the Oregon of Europe to me. Yeah,
Hmm.
I really love it that way. And
But a really special
yeah,
colored water. I haven't been there, but just the pictures I've seen, it's that limestone, clear,
yeah,
incredible blue.
crystal clear water and just beautiful. In the United States, I mean, one of my favorite places to paddle, or one of my favorite rivers that I've paddled on is definitely on the Lochsa River in Idaho. It's really fun, super challenging. There's a wave there that people surf. I'm not going to name it, so I'll probably get death threats, but there is a good river surf wave there. But there's good river surf waves popping up all over. I mean, Colorado has probably some of the best concentration of whitewater parks and play waves. I mean, you can't beat Salida, Colorado. It's the Arkansas River through the Arkansas River Valley has just so many amazing sections. And this, you know, look up the Badfish guys. They can tell you where to go and how to get going there. The Colorado River just downstream in Glenwood Springs has an amazing wave that the whitewater kayakers rallied together and had built. And it turns out it's amazing stand-up paddleboard surfing wave as well. So Colorado has a lot of stuff. I think California has quite a bit of stuff too. That's, it's just there's just not as many whitewater paddlers in California. There's some guys up around the Truckee and
Hmm.
Reno region that are getting after it,
Yeah.
and then in the Appalachians, and western North Carolina, eastern Tennessee, and stuff like that. There's some pretty awesome stretches on the Noli, maybe the Ocoee, and some of the other
Yeah.
sections around there.
I know we get quite an international crowd here. We've got somebody from Argentina, Macedonia. Have you been to South America? I've heard they've got great waters too.
Well, yeah, I probably should have said Chile is one of my favorite places to paddle that I've been as well. Just anywhere down around Pucón is a beautiful place to be and kind of be based. Yeah, I mean, Chile and Argentina have just unbelievably beautiful rivers and awesome people.
And Lily says there's a new whitewater park in Franklin Mills, New Hampshire. Hadn't heard about that one.
I haven't either. So put it on your list. And it's just great to see all these communities rallying around, their local waterway, which a lot of times gets decimated by industry, and then coming in and integrating a whitewater park into the river. And usually that comes along with like nice places to walk and take your dog and have a picnic with your kids, and just generally cleaning up the river, which the river is what attracts the people to the city in the first place, but it's almost always the first thing that gets the most trashed and maybe not as savory an area. So a lot of areas, I mean, Reno did just an amazing job of cleaning up the Truckee through downtown Reno and turning it into a amazing whitewater park. Buena Vista did the same thing in Colorado. And it's good to see that happening in more and more places. Bend
Yeah.
also did the same thing, Bend,
Mhm.
Oregon. So I see that as a nice trend for our sport and the communities that are surrounded around those.
Yeah, and we have mentioned this before, but my mind was blown that there was a thing such as whitewater parks within cities. And Mr. Harvey, you've mentioned already his company. That's what he does for a living is like engineer those parks. And now that I've been to some, it's amazing and so cool, and something for every level. That seems like maybe that would be a good destination place to learn. I assume at most of them there's a shop that could teach you about.
Absolutely. And a lot of times it's easy because you're going to run the rapid or the park and then get out and walk back up and do it again and walk back up and do it again. So by repeating your run through a specific rapid over and over again is probably going to be the quickest way to learn.
Mhm.
I mean, some of the funnest whitewater is definitely like going down a wilderness style river from point A to point B, maybe 10 or 15 miles, because you get to see so many different scenarios. But when you do like a play park and go through the same eddy over and over and over again, that's where you really start to grasp the concepts and get dialed in on all the little minutia and intricacies of the technique that it takes to stand up paddle through whitewater and successfully cross an eddy line and stuff like that.
Yeah. So again, back to your, we talked about industry roles. At events, you have been a top athlete at many. You have been the commentator at many, race director. Do you have a favorite role, and which role are you playing at these upcoming mountain games?
Um, I love to talk. So announcing is really I'm passionate about, especially if it's a sport that I'm passionate about, because I want to teach all the grandmas and the moms out there that have no idea what's going on, or just general public who might be walking by and would just go, oh, that kind of looks interesting, but they keep walking by. I believe it takes, someone good on the microphone or a great commentator to get people out of their seat and walk over and look over the bank of the river and be like, oh my gosh, what is going on here? Like, this is a lot of excited people. Like, what is happening? So just getting people to stand up and cheer for the folks in the river is amazing. And adding a lot of information about the equipment, talking about the techniques, making sure to mention all the athletes and the people who are actually participating and kind of where they're from and a little bit of background on them. I just love that. I get to almost, there's so many people that I virtually know because I've talked about them a lot. So I kind of know a little bit more about them even before I meet them a lot of times. So it's fun for me to develop and to have those kind of friendships and relationships through kind of my announcing career. So, whether it's the Pacific Paddle Games, which I used to help with, or the Mountain Games, which this will be, I think, maybe 14 or 15 years I've been announcing there.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, I get to know the athletes, and then actually even talk about, maybe people like Miles Harvey, who started when he was just a little kid, and now he's like a full-grown adult that, you're going to be hard pressed to beat that guy on the river on any event, now stand-up paddling. So
Cool.
really neat to see kind of just the evolution, and then also see the people coming in that are new and making them feel at home and letting them know that the river, there's nothing like the river and the whitewater community for people getting into it. They love it.
Yeah. Well, I agree with Flatwater Fitness, and she's out of Kansas, that you did an amazing job in North Carolina. And it's wild that you have commentated at some of the biggest events. But the mountain games that are coming up sound like they have like the biggest crowds. I mean, I know Battle of the Paddle had a lot of people on the beach too, but you've got thousands of people you're talking to, like hanging over. And can you answer Lily's question of where is she supposed to stand? Where's the best view of the events or the finish line or whatever it is that you should be watching?
If you're at the Mountain Games, pretty much the International Bridge is the heartbeat of the Mountain Games. And underneath the International Bridge is where we finish all of the whitewater events for the most part. And that's where like the epicenter of the SUP head-to-head racing is, and where the kayak freestyle is. They built a $500,000 feature with inflatable bladders that move plates under the water.
Wow.
And we can go there with the touch of a few buttons, depending on the water level. We can dial in a world-class freestyle kayaking feature, which the town of Vail added that,
Really cool.
which is really cool. It's kind of one of the first that was ever built, and so that's all located underneath the International Bridge, which is also covered. Sometimes they have a jumbotron centered there. Sometimes they build a big stage for us there. But if you're within a couple hundred meters, you're probably going to hear my voice anyways, and tons of people cheering. So that will be the place to be for sure. And it's going to be pretty exciting this year. They added another kayak event, so it's 5 full days of whitewater events this year.
So do you cover all of them, the rafting and the kayak, multiple kayak events and the 2 stand-up?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yep. Well, yep. We have just some of the most amazing head-to-head raft racing in these teeny mini-me rafts, and some of the best kayakers in the world come there for a really intense extreme race, which happens this year on the Wednesday. That's located outside of town on Homestake Creek. If there's enough water this year, we're crossing our fingers, because I don't know if Colorado had a full snowpack this year. They probably are at about 80%. So that's always kind of like the thing there, is there's all the waterways that we host the events on. they're natural. So we don't have a dam that we can kind of control the flow or ask for water that day. We're kind of at the mercy of Mother Nature and what happened all winter and which days it's going to be warm and how much water actually comes. And then there's a bit of an offset because you can have a warm day and then the river peaks at night. So actually the following day, the river's on its way down. So there's just a lot of factors there. So, and that's kind of what makes the racing really interesting is you can go and practice quite a bit on Gore Creek the days leading up to the event, but it's not going to be the same river level probably. Yeah. So a lot changes with just a little bit of additional or a little bit less water than you may have had when you were practicing. So
yeah, like surf, Mother Nature is going to come into play, although yeah, water flow sometimes has other factors in there too. You have watched so much of the water industry for years and years. You've been a part of it. You've worked outside of it. I think you might have even been on this panel at a trade show, and it was talking about how we had a picture of you that we might have used for this one of you going off a waterfall. I know you like adrenaline. I know you all obviously will do pretty wild stuff like that. But from the whole perspective of it, I also on this panel, they talked about how there's a disconnect for some people. They look at that, they want to watch it, they want to see the video, but do they really want to do that sport that somebody's going off a waterfall? How do you, I mean, that's what's, I think, great that there's lots of different levels of that, but where are you now? And would you tell your younger self anything differently, like knowing what you know now?
Oh, probably not. You know, I've always really loved a little excitement. And I think one of the things I really love about whitewater in general is kind of like when you pull out into the main current, there's no looking back. So really there's like no other decision to be made. You kind of have to focus and zone out everything else and just focus on the task at hand.
Yeah.
Because no turning back, and any kind of deviation from the perfect plan could be pretty bad consequences. So you're just forced to really focus, and there's really no turning back at that point. So I like the commitment level there. And, you know, and I think part of what really got me itching to go run some big drops on a whitewater sup was, I knew it would be a sick picture, so I had to have the picture. And B, I think there was some other non-stand-up paddlers that also had the idea that it would be a sick picture, and they weren't really stand-up paddlers, so I was like, no, I'm going to go do that first. No, I'm going to be the stand-up paddler who's actually a stand-up paddler that's going to go run Punchbowl Falls or go run a 40-footer. And yeah, we're not really trying to stick it because you might just, you know, snap your femur in the process. But I've been inspired by some Kodak courage. So yeah, I'm definitely guilty of that.
Kodak courage, I haven't heard that. But what better person to do it than somebody who knows the whitewater and has done it on another craft before. So exactly. That makes a ton of sense. Yeah.
It was, you know, where I did that was very safe. You know, I would have swam off those waterfalls, not even in a kayak, and would have been fine. I had also kayaked off of them several times, so it wasn't like I was just rolling up to Niagara Falls to flick my carcass off the edge of that, you know. So that's a whole different game. But
can you say you have a favorite part of stand-up? I mean, you've done a lot of watercraft, you've done stand-up. It sounds like you really honed in on some of the things right from the beginning, but is there a favorite aspect to stand-up paddleboarding?
Whitewater's definitely my my favorite, but definitely second these days is foiling, is stand-up paddle foiling. I love the feeling. It's low impact on my knees. You know, the speed, the ability to do it, you know, in the gorge going downwind or in the ocean on waves, I think is really kind of cool. And, you know, I've done quite a bit of wing foiling as well. I like the simplicity of it, because you don't have to deal with pumping up a wing and trying to figure out what size you're going to deal with, or just a little more equipment in your hands to play with. Once you get foiling on a stand-up paddleboard, it's a pretty amazing feeling. And that to me is kind of like satisfying, my ultimate search for the, the magic carpet ride, if you will. So it's a lot like riding a snowboard in really deep powder. There's nothing really like it. It's just really fast and it's really soft, and it feels great.
Cool. Well, as an early adopter and an absolute legend in the sport, I'm not surprised that you've gotten into that already and added it to your huge repertoire of different water sports and different craft. And again, you've done everything. Thank you for all you've done for our sport. I mean, you really helped a lot of us get going. Excited that you're continuing your great commentating at the GoPro Mountain Games in just a few weeks. I'm totally like looking at my calendar and how far is the drive to Colorado? I want to go be a part of that. Just sounds like an amazing, amazing week. So good luck and have a blast there doing that one. And we look forward to seeing you. Dan Yak 101, I know, is your Instagram. Where else is a good place for people to get a hold of you?
You can look at my website, dangavere.com. Instagram is great, danyak101. And I've got an athlete page on Facebook, YouTube channel as well. And better yet, just come and see me in person at one of the events. Carolina Cup, the Mountain Games. I'm always at those events, and they're a lot of fun. And hopefully we'll see more events. I really miss like the Pacific Paddle Games and that BOP style of racing. So hopefully we see some more races like that coming up for those that are in those coastal regions where they have access to the waves and the ocean.
Well, maybe from Colorado you need to come down to Southern California because there's a couple things going on, Santa Monica and Oceanside with some waves.
I miss it. Yeah, I miss it. So thank you to SubConnect, and hello to Andre.
Yeah.
It's really cool to see that you guys are still going strong and been around since the beginning as well. So Andre Niemeyer was one of the first guys I met down in Southern Cal, like out paddling and just big smile on his face and just having a blast, tearing it up in the waves.
Yep. I actually finally got to interview him. He had said no forever last week. So it's Legends Month, all kinds of great stuff happening. So thanks again. Good luck, Dan. Thanks for doing this, and everybody who's listening, we so appreciate that. If your friends didn't get to hear this, it is immediately on IGTV for SubConnect's channel, but it also will be on YouTube. You're welcome to use it too, Dan. It'll be on SubConnect's, mine, KT Outside, and maybe Dan's too. Thanks. Great talking with you. All kinds of great information and tips, and always wonderful to learn new things about somebody who I've known for 12 years. So take care. Awesome. Keep it up.
Thanks, Kristen, and thanks to everyone who are listening. Bye.
Be well. Take care.